Right. People are here. Hey. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to those who are joining us from EST time zone. Good morning, good evening from everywhere across the world. Welcome to the Shape of Work Expert webinar. We'll just wait 2 more minutes till everybody, just wait for everybody to trickle in, and then we'll start the webinar. Meanwhile, till people are trickling in, I would request everyone to write in a short introduction, about yourself. I just sent mine. I'm Nisariksha. I look after product and growth at Springworks. Would love to know more of you folks who just joined in. We'll just wait till 1 more minute, and then we can get started. Okay. Meanwhile, yes, while people are still checking in, would love to go through some house rules, just something to keep in mind while you're attending this webinar. So we have a Q&A section. So any time at any point of time you have any questions, for Brenda, for Vijay, for anyone in the panel, feel free to use the Q&A section for that. We also have a chat section which is separate. Use that chat section to talk to us, and then if you have any feedback, use that chat section to give feedback to us. But primarily use the Q&A section to ask questions, and then we'll take questions. Some questions we might take in the middle, and then some we might take at the end of the presentation. Right. So today's webinar, and then all webinars that we have been doing, all of these are they're part of a series of webinars brought out by the Shape of Work community. So this is the community. It's based on Slack. We run this community. We have more than 2,000 people on this community from different functions, different like HR and people ops at different levels. There are people leaders, and then HR VPs from all across the world. Right. We do a lot of things on this community, right? So primarily the main goal is to come together and help everyone know more about the challenges that they're facing, what are the new things that are happening in the people function. But then we also do, conversations and job listings, right? So this is more than, like I said, more than 2,000 HR folks, more than 500 companies on here. They keep posting jobs related to HR and people ops, and this is a great place to find the next gig if you're looking for one. We do 1v1 introductions, so you feel more closer to everyone and keep learning from the community, especially from the leaders. And then I will share the link of the community with you in the chat box in a bit, that you can use to join the community and be a part of the Shape of Work. Awesome. So today's expert webinar is presented by EngageWith, and today we are going to talk about employee surveys. What are the best practices? How do we boost responses? How do we leverage, surveys to understand more about DEI initiatives? Just introducing the panel real quick. Jijit, does product marketing at Springworks. He will be hosting the webinar. So do you want to take this up, Jijit?
Yes. Thanks, sir. Hello, everyone. and welcome to today's expert webinar, Employee Survey Best Practices. And really glad that everyone's here, and thank you for finding the time and joining in. So yeah, by the end of this webinar, I think you're going to be having a really valuable session and, getting some idea on like the ways to boost employee survey responses, increase participation and more. So yeah, let's start off. So before we start off and jump in, of course, let's welcome Brenda Pack. She's the co-founder and CEO of Backpack. And hello, Brenda. So would you like to introduce yourself to our attendees and everyone present?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. And thanks everyone for taking the time to spend a few minutes of your busy day with us. My name is Brenda. I'm the co-founder of Backpack. Our main mission is to help companies build a DEI backbone into their people strategy that helps to create a more inclusive and diverse culture. Basically a place where employees can bring their whole selves to work. We really believe in a holistic approach to DEI. The first is we want to meet you where you are, understand your gaps to create an action plan specifically for you, nothing out of the box. And 3, help you engage employees with accountability and change.
Right. Thanks. That's awesome, Brenda. Before we just dive in, I think a lot of people might want to know also, and we are curious too, why the name Backpack? What was the idea behind coming up with that name?
Yeah, so the original mission to Backpack, we had stated is the pack that gives back. So often like a wolf pack or, like a lion's pack. So, you run together in groups and you live in groups, right? So we felt like we wanted to become a group that could really bring change to the world. So that's why we did Backpack. It has nothing to do with my last name. Many people think that it has nothing to do with my last name.
Okay. I mean, that's a pretty interesting thought. I like that, the phrase that you use, like the wolf pack, you give a pack that gives back to the people who comes in. That's really interesting. Right. Awesome. So let's, I guess, dive right in and let's start off. So as the title says, employee surveys, and that's what we're going to be starting to talk about. So what is your take on surveys? Why are surveys important? How does surveys make a difference, in the scenario of an organization and more?
Yeah, I have a couple things there. I think the most important is that it tells your people that they have a voice and it's being heard and it actually matters. And having this voice heard provides you as a leader a pulse on, what the company is doing right now, how are people feeling, and understand what they need and understand where you can help improve those areas of gaps.
Okay. Now, I mean, let's say DEI, right? It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. All the three are different pillars, and it's coming to one space and interconnecting, right? So, what is it? I mean, what is the difference in these three pillars, and when they come together, what is the difference that it brings out? And how is it connected to surveys, when it comes to DEI surveys and all of those?
Yeah, so these days, actually, for many people in the audience, they'll know that it's DEIB. So it's diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion as well. I said that in a different order, but basically we're adding the B because we really believe that belongingness is equally important as the other pillars in DEIB. And so why I think it's so important is that what this really means is, are you in a culture, have you cultivated a culture that has that diverse population? Does it have equitable policies? Does it have equitable representation? Does it have inclusive, measures? For instance, do you have the gender neutral bathroom set up? Do your employees understand what that means? As well as belongingness. And why belongingness is so important is because employees that have a sense of purpose are like 20% more productive within companies. And so it's good for your top line and bottom line, but it also gives your employees a reason to stay longer at the company. And because of these things, that's why employee engagement surveys are so important, because it helps you further investigate into the nuances of your company and the nuances of what people are talking for. And so it provides that data that can help with the employee experience. It tells you one story. So taking that story of what employees feel on the survey, combining that with real data, allows you to have a holistic picture of the company.
All right. So in this, scenario of DEI, like how is a survey going to make a difference when it comes to DEI? How is a survey and a DEI connected? Like, how is it going to bring that out?
You have to see a survey as just one measurement in time, and DEI is not just a single action. It is a marathon of continual progress and tracking that progress. And so surveys are a good way to see each stage along that journey, along that marathon, to see, hey, are we improving? Are we being held accountable for the metrics that we said we're going to measure?
Right. Got it. Yeah, that makes pretty sense. But now, of course, now we've got an idea that, surveys are important and it gives you data. But I think there is always this confusion as to when you should send a survey, how many surveys, at what time of the day, month, year. This is very confusing. And as employees also, I've always felt that you should not be bugging people with surveys, right? Survey should be something where it is used to collect that information that is going to make a difference. So what is the ideal frequency or, the cadence of setting up surveys, and what are the kind of surveys that ideally should go out, and when should it actually be going?
Yeah, so market practice, just from my experience of advising like hundreds of companies at different sizes along the way, I've seen most frequently it being annually or even biannually. But we've also seen that there are certain companies that are at more risk. For instance, companies that might have made reputational mistakes or are just beginning their DEI journey and don't really know how to engage. So then they'll do surveys maybe quarterly, actually, to really understand the pulse of the employees that are under them so that they can really activate change at a faster pace. And so that's really what we see as frequency in market practices.
And so ideally, in these surveys that go out quarterly or annually, is there a difference in questions that, does the questions depend on the time that you're sending out the surveys? Like if it's a quarterly, then does the question differ, or when it's annually, it's a different kind of questioning? Is there any difference in that makes you feel?
Yeah, unfortunately, because if you send out a survey annually or biannually, the survey will be a little bit longer. It's actually quite a bit longer. It really depends on the company in terms of how long it actually is. There are sensitive topics within certain companies that might not be sensitive in another company. And so Backpack, when we are helping to produce and to create these surveys along with the companies, we take all those things into account. We have our own question bank. We have our own strategy of how we want to question, but we definitely take into account, how long has it been since the last survey? So if you're doing it on a quarterly basis, the surveys are going to be much, much shorter.
Oh, okay. Have there been situations, or are there situations where, the frequency of these surveys are like, really close by, maybe like weekly surveys? Like maybe it could be a part of an organizational growth in terms of DEI and culture. Have there been any times where, the surveys, or can we set up surveys that are weekly? Would it make a difference, or would it just hamper the experience?
So I think there's two parts to that question. The first is there is survey fatigue. And so as you know that, people don't generally enjoy taking a million surveys. And so we do try to limit our exposure to surveys. If we did insist on taking a weekly survey, it would be more of a pulse survey. And so it'd be super simple. Maybe it would take 30 seconds and it would just, kind of attack the 5 different questions that we're really trying to measure. And then we would send that out on a weekly basis. We'd also have to offer incentives as well. to a lot of employees just to make sure that they're taking it. Sometimes we've done like competitions among departments to see kind of, who has like 100% survey attendance versus others, and then someone will get a prize, that department. So we've tried different incentives as well to push surveys.
Oh, okay. That sounds good. So in these questions that go out annually, weekly, or quarterly, like any of it, are there any specific like parts or points that you focus on depending on when the survey is going on? Like any topic that which comes under the DEI space that you completely focus on?
So I know that no one likes this answer, but it always depends. But the two aspects that we always make sure we include are quantitative measures as well as qualitative measures. So if you're doing quantitative, we'll make sure that we have a very easy to understand scale, whether it's 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, so that people can accurately present that. And then we'll take those numbers and we'll be able to, through our system, calculate and see what the actual score is. We'll also have qualitative questions as well as spaces for people to freely express their thoughts. Because a lot of these surveys are anonymized, it gives them that freedom to get visibility into opinions that maybe they normally wouldn't be able to vocalize.
That makes sense, right? So some of our attendees have also been interested in this part of the frequency and cadence, and we do have a couple of questions. So we have Sukin, who's come out with a question that I've heard employers launching regular micro surveys, which are, weekly and daily pulse check-ins. And the question is like, how can these be integrated with the annual or the biannual exercise? And what would be the approach to deploying these smaller surveys? That is.
Yeah. So before any survey is deployed, I think we always need to take a step back and see what the purpose of this survey is and what we're actually measuring and what we want to see a difference in. And so if we were going to tie this back to a larger annual survey, I would say one, there will definitely be similarities in the types of questions so that they can be cross-referenced to see, one, if there's any difference between maybe a shorter pulse survey versus the longer survey. And then at the end, when we're doing generally like annual reports for boards or investors for some of these companies, we'll be able to kind of calculate with our machine learning to just kind of understand and integrate that data together. For us as Backpack, we are very, very focused on data and analytics. So any form of data that we can get in multiple different surveys helps give us more information that we can accurately predict things like retention, even to the point where we know which employee is going to leave next month, why, and just have those assumptions. So information is key.
You're trying to say that the information that you get in these surveys is strong enough to make assumptions that there is a possibility that this, like a certain thing could happen. Like,
yeah, not like 100%, but these surveys are always one side of the story, right? And so we take people metrics and data that we often get from companies, like raw data, just about their people, and then we combine that with the survey. And so then that's how we're accurately able to kind of tell the whole story about a company.
Right. Also, there's a second part of this question, like what is a good or a validated employee, survey template that you can use? Like, is there a form?
A survey template.
Yeah, it could ideally be like anything that you should completely focus on when you're writing the survey. Like, this is the part you need to focus.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to measure. So in the world of DEI, we generally like to deploy employee engagement surveys, which, again, as I said, we're trying to understand where the employee is at in terms of how they feel about their team, about their manager, about their leadership, their future in this company, how they feel about, discrimination, race, gender orientation, all of those factors. And so, we want to measure those things about the individual to kind of come to a cumulative answer for the company. And so for us, that's really important. So for example, some of the questions we'll often ask are, when I speak up at work, my opinion is valued, or I feel confident I can develop my career at my company, or I feel like I belong at my company. So these are all questions that are put on a scale to help us measure.
Right, got it. We have one more question. This is from Elena, and it's that is there a best practice cadence for new hire surveys? I think surveying a new hire is pretty important. That is where the actual time starts, when somebody has come into the organization and they start getting the hang of what's happening there. So is there a best cadence for those new hires whenever you're putting out a survey?
So it's interesting. The first thing is I'd want to back up. I would say that the training actually begins at the hiring stage before they're hired, to kind of show them that the culture is a very inclusive culture. And so even when you're doing kind of the hiring language, plus just, telling them how the company is, that's when you're kind of indoctrinating them into what they should expect. And so then once they go in, they know, okay, so I knew that I could already expect this. And you can, in many ways in which we hire with, in which we help with recruiting, is we will often take a pulse on when they first arrive, and then 3, 6, 9, 12 months, we'll kind of measure how they're doing at each stage and see kind of, has their opinion of the company changed? Has their opinion of the manager, their team, their, skill set, their confidence level, has any of that veered since they've joined the company? And so that's kind of how we think about it every couple of months.
Makes sense. Right. Well, thanks folks for the questions. Of course, please feel free to add more questions as and when we go forward. So let's move on to the next part of today. So so we've got an idea of why surveys are important and the cadence and frequency, but just creating a survey, just because we know that a survey is important and just we create it for the sake of it, it's not going to make a difference, right? So ideally, what are the steps or what are the strategies that we could actually use to leverage these surveys to understand and promote DEI? As employees or someone joining a new company, it is very important to understand that space, right? What is DEI, and as an employee, how much I am meant to be given given this inclusion and meant to be a part of this DEI space. So what is a way to leverage these surveys according to you?
Got it. So I think what you're saying is you want to know kind of what do we do after we get the surveys? Is that correct? And the action steps we're taking?
Yeah, of course, that is also a part of it. And also how do we use the surveys to understand and promote DEI within the organization? How is that insights going to help us? How are we going to?
Yeah, so just going back to, I think, a previous comment I might have made, which is that DEI is not just a single spurt of action. It's actually a marathon of continual progress and tracking and just seeing how we change. I mean, you can't change what you can't measure. So for us to even begin DEI, we have to understand the state of its people. We have to understand, how people are feeling in that moment and where they feel like there's lack within the company. And only after we're able to measure that are we able to change that and leverage what we use with surveys. And so think of surveys as, an internal health marker on where your people are that provides both qualitative and quantitative insights on what needs to be done. I often say that DEI is almost like an insurance policy for the future of a company. You have to invest in it like you do with life insurance. Monthly, you pay for your life insurance, right? You continue to invest in it. And it's something that reminds you, okay, I need to take care of this thing. I need to take care of my life. And so you slowly continue to keep the health up of yourself. So just like in a company, you have to keep your health of your company up, keeping the people's well-being in mind. And so when something does happen, hopefully not, knock on wood, right? That's why we have insurance. It's not a sudden DEI rush, because your company already has that insurance in place and the strategy is in place to kind of build up that culture and to let your people know that they're well taken care of. And so that's how I see, surveys just being a tool to really show that, hey, one, you care about your people, you are measuring it, you want to be accountable, and you're going to actually take action on the results of this survey.
Right. So, I mean, let's say if I've joined in as an employee, right? Like, as you rightly mentioned, right before the hiring process, like when the hiring is going on itself, you get an idea of the culture and the DEI space and what the company follows. So as an employee, after I join, like after I've joined a company that's promoting and understanding DEI, how do I make sure as an employee that the claim that the company is making is in place and it is actually working on? Like, how do you understand that?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. I have worked with many companies that have been trying to answer this question, and unfortunately, again, it depends. It depends on your company. It depends on how your company thinks about transparency to its employees. Some companies that I've worked with are incredibly transparent, and so they will release it, the results of the employee survey as is. And they will provide their own feedback. Often the CEO is the one that will release this information and kind of give his feedback, take accountability for it, and say, hey, we're going to be transparent about this. We're going to measure this, and we're going to measure this on our portal. We're going to measure this in this way, and really come up with a extensive, action plan to that survey. There are other companies who almost feel like, the employees need to know a half-truth in many ways, and the other half will only hurt kind of the morale of it, right? So, they'll only release maybe the good parts in many ways and show kind of what's really great, but they won't release where we find gaps, and they will choose instead to work internally, just among leadership, to see if they can make that change. So it depends on, the company culture that you're working in.
Right. So now we spoke about leveraging. So adding on to that, like once you've leveraged the surveys and you actually started understanding the space, like how do you derive the insights from these surveys? Like, and how do you build action items? Right? Just sending out a survey, getting the response, that is not going to make the difference. The response should ideally give that sense to build an action item to either improve which is not something which is not good, or make something which is good better than what it is. So how do you do that? How is that done?
Right. So after we get the survey, this is a very broad generalization because, again, each survey is very different, but we break it down into a few key areas. The first is, how are employees feeling? Do they feel a sense of purpose? And just to throw a stat out to you, research does show that employees who do feel more purpose are 2.3 times more productive and engaged in work, improve top line and bottom line growth by 10 to 20%. So that is something we definitely measure. The second thing is, how do these results impact retention and future hiring? Like, what does this mean? What story is this telling when we're going out and trying to recruit new people or trying to keep our employees to stay? And then the third thing is, how does this impact promotion? Are there certain groups that are being promoted over others? Are we seeing, certain types of leaders instead of seeing a diverse group of leaders? So we break it down into a few key areas, and then we develop an action plan related to that. So, for instance, from the results, we'll think through, any policies that need to be amended, whether it's employee handbooks or whether it's certain maternity or paternity leave, kind of just any of those policies. And then we'll also be thinking about trainings that need to be provided either at an employee or at a manager level. We'll also be thinking about changes to executive communication plans. We want to share results with the boards, advisors, investors. We want to launch other employee programs like ERG groups or employee resource groups. We want to make sure that we have a cultural calendar. We're celebrating all the events that are relevant to our employees. And then I think lastly, as always, there always needs to be accountability, like we spoke about earlier, and transparency. And so this is a way to almost force executives and team leads to set concrete goals that everyone needs to meet and make it a part of even their comp structure, which we've helped a lot of companies develop to keep these executives accountable.
Right. I in fact had a question right before, in the previous part, and in fact one of our attendees have also brought up that question. Whenever there are these surveys put out, there is always a possibility that the employee answers these questions randomly, or they would either do an employer pleasing attitude so that you don't do anything wrong. So is there a way that we can deal with that?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. One is we definitely encourage all of our, HR and people leaders to make the surveys anonymous. And so that we're the only ones that, if we do get that information of which emails it came from and things like that, we are able to do like a blinding before that. So we will take that out when we give it to the leadership, and we will, kind of summarize the results, provide our insights into it, and so that they can see those results without thinking about, hey, like, why is my department saying that they are really unhappy with the manager and things like that. So we want to take out that kind of bias. And we also are super careful about making sure there is alignment on who we're showing these results to, right? So from the get-go, we don't want to show this to every team leader and, every VP and every, like HR leader, right? We want to take it to a small group of probably the DEI council that generally has a lot of executives on it. We'll review the results with them, and then they'll have alignment in terms of how they want to share the information and which pieces they want to share the information. And so this is a way that we can just be able to kind of digest that information from the surveys before it's released to a broader public, because we want to be able to also talk to our employees about it and have thoughtful responses. And so that requires us to really sit down with the results as leaders and to see where we want to go with this.
Okay. That's a pretty valid point. One of our attendees have also brought out this. Do you think anonymity is more helpful in getting authentic data points for us?
Yeah, I mean, I do think so. I think you'll get more than less, but I do think it's also a bell curve. So you're going to have extremes on both ends. And so what we often do is we sift through every single survey and every single question. And we definitely, put together results so that we have outlier opinions. But a lot of the times, there's a lot of consensus amongst what people are feeling. And so we're able to, give a broader picture of that.
Right. So there was one more question, and also one of our attendees have come up with this. I mean, whenever you're framing a question that goes into a survey, it's always important to check the language spot, the language blind spots or checkpoints. Like any wrong word or any phrase that is not proper for the question, it could make a really big difference. So is there what are some of the language related blind spots that shouldn't cross a line and you should not put into a question when you're phrasing?
That is such a great question. This is one of the reasons why there are so many iterations when we do surveys. It's, we will provide a recommendation in terms of what we think the survey should be like. And we will go through iteration after iteration with leadership, as well as like an unbiased third party that we work with in our partnership levels, to provide a survey that is not misleading and that does not have questions that lead to certain answers or has unconscious biasy language within it. And so we go through iteration after iteration to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. And like, what are some of the quantitative statistics, that are usually analyzed in a survey? Like, do we actually go into the details like mean and regression and analytical predictive insights, or is it like we just look into the data, the raw data that we have in space, and just react on that?
Oh no, I mean, if you want that answer, I gotta get my CTO on this call, but it is magic.
Oh,
We have AI embedded in just all that we do with this data. And the way I understand it, because there are people much smarter than I, is we get the raw data, it goes into our backpack magic box. They do a bunch of statistics, regressions, they do all of those things, and then it comes out and you're able to have just like a predictability model. It's great, but I will get my CTO on another webinar if you'd like to know about that.
definitely. Of course. So yeah, moving to the next part. So we have a case study of the betting technology company that worked with Backpack. We are really curious to know more about this. Like, what was the approach and how did they reach out to Backpack? What is the problem and all of
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about it. They are a company that is near and dear to my heart. We have worked with them for a number of years and I absolutely love them. But basically, they had come to us when they had recently just acquired 2 other betting technology companies. So they are on their way to really just grow and grow fast. And now the goal was to create a unified culture because as you can, like bringing in 2 other cultures that are completely different from you is going to create a fragmented culture. And so on top of that, there was an added layer of complexity where this company was a PE-owned portfolio company, which meant that they needed to answer to a board and investors on how they were going to actually achieve certain results, including a unified culture and DEI progress. Because this PE company is very focused on DEI metrics. So, they asked for help to think through what metrics, what actions, what results they needed to look for. And so we really started from the beginning. We did a formal assessment, which we went in and did an extensive analysis of just their, raw employee data. And we released employee engagement surveys. We did it in English and in Spanish because we knew that they had a large Spanish population as well. And so we wanted, full participation in it. And so through Backpack, we were really trying to understand the current atmosphere. And, not surprisingly, a lot of the results showed that there was a lot of dissatisfaction. They felt like, I'm really familiar with my teammates in the Arizona office, but I have never met the people in the New York office. And now we have another company that's coming in from Seattle. And I don't know what that means for my future, for my team. Do I have job stability? Like, what does this mean for a company as a whole? Who are these people that are coming? Are they going to take my job? And so there's a lot of thoughts, and all of this came out in the survey because up until that point, people really didn't have an outlet to express these things, especially as these mergers were happening, because a lot of the executives were just tied up in terms of the M&A process. So it was fascinating to go through the results, but with those results, we were able to really move forward with a great execution plan. And, we were able to look at everything from recruiting to retirement. And even with hiring, we had to train a lot of the recruiters on how to be very conscientious of their unconscious biases. We had to teach them all the different biases that could be happening. We had to teach them that certain words, as you mentioned earlier, can lead to certain answers, and we needed to be careful about that. We need to be careful about who even the interviewer would be that would be hiring new employees, because as you know, there's a like me bias where it's like, I will want to hire someone who is like me. And so that can often skew hiring. And so we had to really go in from the beginning, and it's been a journey, but we can definitely say that in terms of employee satisfaction, we were able to raise it, 35% just in the last year in terms of just, feeling a sense of purpose. And, on this page alone, if you see the backpack in action, that's just a screenshot of one of the events we did across all the different, companies, where they got to volunteer online and they got to advise a couple different nonprofits where people were looking for certain technical jobs, like becoming a security guard. And a lot of the employees at this bedding company were able to provide like technical advice. They were able to provide interview questions, all of those things. So it's really been a great journey with them.
I mean, that is amazing. Like, it's like you started with them from scratch and built it to something that it is now. It's amazing. And also the pictures that you see around and the activities. I think everybody who's on this call would get an idea of like what backpack does. I mean, this is more than enough to give an idea of how it goes. I mean, it's a wonderful story. Yeah.
We're super proud. And like, I guess just one last thing I just wanted to mention is, for everyone on this call, everything I've said, it can sound really overwhelming, but there are tools that will help you along this journey. If you don't know where to start with engagement surveys, there are templates. Certain survey companies I know provide example DEI questions, so that's always a great place to start. And also Backpack, you can always reach out to us and we can really help devise a plan to attack and really conquer any of your DEI worries. So please reach out if you have any questions and we'd be happy to help.
I think the last 2 slides of those pictures, I think everybody would, would do that. But anyways, that was a great story to have shared. And that brings us to the last part for the day, like tools to help you run effective surveys. So we have Nisar here to just show how EngageWith is going to help you do that. Nisar.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Brenda, for this was a very, very nice kind of fireside chat. Learned a lot about leveraging surveys properly. I had a good question kind of before I move on. Like, Brenda, what do you think is a good participation rate that can help kind of identify a particular sample size for any survey? For example, if I have 100 employee company, relatively smaller, but let's say I get a 20% participation, right? Like, would you still consider that to kind of show the real organization, or what is kind of that good threshold where you can definitively say that, okay, this is what our employees represent?
Yeah, so I'm not going to use the word lucky, but we have consistently seen with our surveys about 75 to 80% engagement. And that we feel like is a very good number in terms of just understanding. We've also seen, participation as low as 55%. Again, it's, right over that 50% marker. And so, as people leaders know, we'll take what we can get. People are often busy and it is often, like pulling teeth to get them to do these engagement surveys and different things. But yeah, anything from that range, I think we're okay with. I would say that 20% was a little too low to really understand what the company is feeling. And so just one last thing about that, like I think a great strategy for that is to take it in pieces. If you're finding that engagement is very difficult, you can often do it by department to department. And that way you can, engage people in small groups and then take kind of the overall data later. So that's just another tactic to engage your employees.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, ideally, everybody in whoever is attending, especially, they would want 100% engagement, like a 100% response. But yeah, so like we had the same problem, right? At Springworks, like we were not able to kind of get like a lot of people to participate, and that's why we built like this tool specifically to run surveys that can help you get more responses overall, right? I'll quickly show you what that looks like. So we built a direct integration on Slack. So what the biggest challenge in responding to surveys is employees have to go to a different platform, kind of sit through 30 kind of questions, surveys, and then respond to them. It requires a lot of context switching, right? When you are in responding to those surveys, and then, like you said, that survey fatigue comes in. People are busy doing different things. To tackle that problem, we built it directly inside Slack, right? So what we did is, so we built EngageWith. We have a lot of templates that people use to run their surveys, like from our perception to inter-team relationship, and we have many more that companies can use to run their surveys. The best part is that everything happens on Slack, right? So when, let's say, I recently launched an organizational perception survey, right? And then the question directly appears on your Slack. So it's very easy for employees to respond to it because they don't have to switch to another platform. Super simple to kind of come in here, see the question, do you believe your organization is able to achieve its objectives? And then I kind of rate it on a scale of 10. The next question comes up directly here. So the goal is to make responding to surveys as frictionless as possible, so you get highest participation. And we have seen participation rates go up even more than 100%, right? So first they used to have like 30%, 50% response rates. They go all the way up to 80-90% response rates because it is on Slack and the process is frictionless, right? And then obviously you have all the bells and whistles around using and creating surveys. So you can use the questions, you can change question types, change it to agree disagree scale. We have very detailed library that you can use to add more questions to it, set up a schedule. Like Brenda also mentioned, right, that that survey fatigue comes in when you ask very long survey questions. So we have built a feature where you can enable a rolling ones, right? And what that does is it just sends few questions each day. And then when employees kind of come in and kind of log into the Slack to start their work, they see those questions, they respond to it, and then kind of get into kind of their daily work. So very, very useful feature that helps boost responses. Yeah, that's what that's why we built EngageWith. We are working with more than 300 companies currently to do their surveys, and yeah, would love to kind of get feedback from everyone here. If you want to try, feel free to kind of message me, and then we can do a personalized demo for you from there. Right. Thanks, Sujit.
Right. Thanks, Nisar. So, hey guys, so that kind of brings us to the end of this webinar. I hope that everybody had a nice time. And Brenda, thank you so much for being here, finding the time to be here and provide us with this beautiful session from yours. I think everyone has learned a lot, and they have a clear idea of the space. And would you like to say something? How was it like? How was your experience? Anything?
Oh, it was so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a blast.
All right. Well,
Awesome.
thank you so much. And before we leave, would like all our attendees to inform you that we have our next webinar coming up next month, and it will be beyond the office walls, and it's going to mainly talk about building a strong culture for your remote and hybrid workforce, which is a new norm, right? The remote working. So that is what is going to be our next topic. The link to register for the webinar, the registrations are open, and the link will be shared in chat very shortly. And we expect a lot of you all to be there for the next session. So looking forward. And once again, thank you so much for being here, for finding the time. It was great catching up. So until next time, it's thank you and have a nice day. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And then, yes, I've just